Hey, yo, it's Yogi Chander, and I'm here with Michael Wann from Susquehanna Alchemy. Michael, how's it going?
It's going well. Thank you for having me here. It's always a pleasure to connect with new people and to hear what's going on with other people and share what's going on my side of the world. So I think it's very necessary what at this particular moment in time that we do as much connection as we can, any way which we can, with as much awareness as we can. So thank you for having me. It's snowing here. I love a good snow day.
Same here.
Well, it's always snowing where you are, right?
Now, it's not as snowy as you might think, but it's we've had a good amount this year for sure. But that personal connection, I really miss that too. And you were just on a train, so I'd love to do some introductions and chat. But you were just on such a nice roll about your technology thing. And the thing is we both have a similar view about this, and so we would both prefer an in-person meeting. And we can't do that, unfortunately, right now for many reasons. But so here we are. This technology is facilitating this today. And I'm so happy to have you here. So what was your feeling? I was kind of digging into your brain about just kind of picking your brain about what tech you use.
Well, I think that if we're truly going to have like a thoughtful conversation about this topic, we need to put it in an even grander perspective. So what year were you born?
1970.
Okay, I'm 1971. So
I thought you were close. Okay, cool.
So particularly with technology and culture, but we'll focus on technology right now, to really understand like how an individual relates to it. You have to look at what was available at that time, regardless of what was available in your house. That's important, but it's not as important as like what was the cultural norm, because the human being, and this is just the nature of being human, is like we adapt. And particularly in our first 7 years, and we adapt to everything. So like, yeah, you adapt to the language they speak to the household, but you adapt to everything. You adapt to the technology and all that. So everything which is out there in the culture. So right. You and I would be in like, generally what they call Generation X. And right. We are in this very unique spot. Generation X is, to me, the X is a variable. It's like, what the hell is Generation X going to be? Or what are they going to do? And so what makes Generation X so significant is that we were born before, like, and I'll just use these touch points, widespread cable TV at the household and video games in the household.
Yeah, but I have lots to say about that. Both those things. Go ahead.
Both were introduced to Generation X at a relative young enough point that we were able to adapt to it. So yes. There, like literally within your nervous system and within my nervous system, there was a period of time where like people didn't have cable TV. Like cable TV just wasn't a thing. And so then we go forward and we look at each generation, and it's not just technology. I think the other key markers are like the major cultural trauma events, 9/11, Columbine, and they've as we become emotionally
charged.
We've gotten used to it. Like they're not quite as significant. But anyway, so all of these make up like kind of like our relationship with technology. So fast forward to like, people who are turning 30 right now, who were born in 1990, and they came of age like totally in alignment with social media. Like if you think of like, and that's a real interesting thing. So to like go through what we'll call adolescence or puberty or like, whatever that is during with social media, like that's like no one's ever done that before. And then we've got the people who are born now who are just born into it. So all of that being said, it's created this like, in the deepest parts of our consciousness, at least like, human being consciousness, not getting like out there outside of the matrix sort of stuff. Like, that is our relationship with technology. So all of that being said, what makes Generation X so special, and arguably this is true with the previous generation, but more so with Generation X, and I could go into that in a moment a little bit more if you're interested in the generation stuff. We do remember what it was like before technology, and we bring about that memory of the past. You know, I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Lancaster, Pennsylvania, one of the things it's known for is it has the largest population of Amish anywhere in North America, highest concentration. And so the Amish are a timekeeper. They're literally living. I mean, a lot of it is also like, quote unquote, like they're living without technology. But what they're doing is they remember a time of life by living their lives in a certain way. They keep that alive. And that's really true with any people that are living in a non-like contemporary status. But Generation X, in a general way, we like have within us this way that like, at least within the matrix, like how people used to communicate, how people used to interact. And so I think it's very natural for people of our age to like really want to do things like face to face. And we want to have like that thing, which is very familiar in our nervous system. And I think that's basic within all human beings. Like just because you were born in the 90s doesn't mean like you don't get face to face interaction, but you're going to inherently understand it differently because of just when you were born. Just like people are born 20 years before us understand things differently. So all of that said, like one of the reasons why it's so important that like people of our age, every generation is going to bring in something different right now, but why we continue to remember like this is how we used to be, because there is like, it's going to go down the memory hole. It's going to go down the memory hole. And, having an awareness of that right now is important. So that was just the preface to your question, which is like, how do you deal with technology? And my thing was, and what I was saying is like I try to do, like I've said, like I'm going to walk away completely from technology, and I just wasn't able to do that for a variety of reasons. It wasn't practical, and then secondly, like I'm as hooked as anyone else. You know, I'm not ashamed to admit that. And I think like for this particular time, for what I think my particular purpose is, I need to utilize technology, but I'm doing it with conscious awareness. And what that means for me is like, I'm not trying to be the most efficient with technology. I don't want to know the cutting edge technologies. And this is in context to like, how do you like record your content? How do you like upload it? What different things? Like, I don't care. Like, I've got something that works. I want to use it. And what I'm trying to do is like, rather than hosting my own show and having to have all of that, not just responsibility, but integration with the technology, I'm going to go on to other people's platforms who've already done that. And, that way it enables me to like, almost like a daisy chain, like to be able to go and reach a wider audience without having to, like literally, this is what's happening. You are integrating your psyche into the electromagnetic net, the web. Like those words are meaningful. It's a web and it's a net. They designed it that way.
For sure. Yes.
How's that for an opening monologue?
That is fantastic. That all came off of that question about like, recording our live streams and stuff like that. And so I love it. Michael, if you don't mind, I'd love to just dive into some deepness. We can just go into the rabbit holes that we find and just find where we go.
I'll follow your lead.
Whenever you need to stop, let me know if you need to take a break or something, because I get lost and hyper focused and lose time. So, okay. And I'll let you just talk for a lot of things.
All right. Well, let's start. Where do you want to go?
Well, you touched on so many things that I want to comment on and then kind of go from there. But so yeah, born about the same time, we grew up with that. Not only our experience being not completely tech, sort of analog, I guess, but also coming from, a familial push, or not push, but a familial paradigm that's the same, right? Analog, basically. So we come from that, but then we have a foot in the tech, right? In the new. Yeah. So we're in that kind of liminal space.
That's Generation X. That's Generation X.
For sure. And what's fascinating.
And let me just point this one other thing. This is what I find is so significant, is you have to put everything in context. So as we speak, so theoretically, theoretically everything's always like, you're always on the cutting edge of like, you know, what's unfolding in reality, particularly if you're experiencing reality from linear time. And you know, I'm totally interested in and open to like, yeah, time's not linear, but have you experienced it like in a very practical way? And I haven't, with it not being linear. So I'm going to use linear time because that's what we all understand reality to be. Linear time, we're always on this cutting edge. Things are changing, and you have to realize like the change really started post World War II, when all of our grandparents came back from World War II. They got the biggest mind fuck right there, and they came back and everything was changed. They're like, oh, you got to move to the suburbs, and here's new culture, and there's Hollywood, and like, I'm like, I just came from the most horrific experience, and you're expecting me to move in, like all of that. And that's when it all started changing. It's getting faster and faster and faster. All of that is leading to this moment right now, like beginning really March 13th, 2020 was, you know, that was the moment. We're about to begin year one in, this is just in the matrix. It's just in the matrix. It's a matrix year one. There's the greater reality and there's the simulation, but that's changing, and that's changing right now. So why that's important about Generation X is we look at part of understanding reality from a generational perspective is different generations, depending upon where they are at any given moment, they carry a different responsibility. Like, you know, you've got the elders, and you got like the people who are having babies, and you got like the children, you got all of these things. And so Generation X is at the location in time, like let's say like mid 40s to mid 50s, like enough energy that you can take on like leadership responsibility, but then enough, but you have that perfect balance between that energy, that life energy, coupled with wisdom. Like you've got enough experience that we've got a little bit of wisdom. We don't got the experience like a 70-year-old, but we may have like generally we have more energy to go and lead. And so when we look at now being the time, like that, there's this transition. There's a transition in the matrix. That's all that's happening. It's a matrix transition. There's no other transition, but everyone just lives in the matrix, so it feels real. The Generation X folks are in that leadership position, whatever leadership may mean. And what makes Generation X so special is we have in our nervous system a memory of analog, like a literal in our nervous system. And that's what the X is. That's what the variable is. It's like, what you gonna do? What are you gonna do? How are you gonna meet this time?
Holy mackerel, man, you're blowing my mind. I've had a lot of these similar thoughts, and I've not had the opportunity to talk with anybody about these things. So amazing, man. I felt like that almost innate responsibility. Like some people have a responsibility, or that genetic pull or whatever it is, to have children, I suppose. Mine is to somehow pass on the analog nature of humanity. But also not to reject technology, because I grew up with, and this is a whole nother set of things that we'll get into, but my experience with growing up with video games and computers and stuff like that was unique. But my dad was in World War II, and he was born in Depression era. So he went from, the Depression era mentality, which he still carried a bit with him, into what you were just saying, into that whole social expectation of everything you just said. And so that was kind of a strange thing to be a part of. But anyway, the variable thing is all jiving with me. So what did you mean exactly about that timeline, that we're in year one of the timeline, and how it relates to World War II?
So everything has changed on Earth, or at least culture on Earth, beginning with like, and this is my mark. I'm using the United States, and like, maybe that's United States centric, but at this given time, the United States is like, they set the marker in a lot of ways, at least culturally, for much of the people in the world. So that's why I use the United States as the marker. So March 13th, Friday the 13th, 2 days before the Ides of March, right? We are all
huge,
right? So, and we all have ingrained, or at least ingrained in the collective consciousness from Shakespeare, who's Francis Bacon, and who was the architect behind this whole thing. But that's not a different topic. We're told to beware of the Ides of March. Excuse me?
Maybe John Dee, I've heard. But
Oh,
anyway,
well, exactly. Well, they're the same folks. It's like, it's
right.
just the fact that you recognize, like when I say the same folks, maybe not necessarily the same one, but it's the same cadre. So this idea has been planted in our minds for a while of like,
Yes.
Friday the 13th, the Ides of March. And it was
Yes.
also a week before the spring equinox, which is traditionally has traditionally been the marker of the new year. Like our new year now is January 1, which is more or less like the winter solstice, but nonetheless. So year one is when everything changed. So what's happening is, one way of looking at it is there's a huge gamble that's happening right now. So there have been like, there's always like, there are different people who have who literally have a different view of reality, and they have, you mentioned it yourself, like, this is my responsibility, and they live through life. This is my responsibility. And they tend to be part of like, what we would call like elite circles and often mystical circles, and their job is to is the small numbers to control the large masses. All right. Yeah. And they often do it behind the scenes, and they do it in subtle ways. And, anyone who's done any like conspiracy sort of like investigation, you kind of know what I'm talking about.
But there's nothing so nefarious about that in its nature, right? I mean, like anybody who's tried to manage a group of people knows that. I mean, there are things, if you're a small group managing a larger group, there are certain things you need to do and certain things you don't want to disclose. Fair. However, there's a deeper aspect to all that shit. Right?
Well, yeah. And so the group, and like, and it's if you are being honest with yourself, when you do this research, you have to be left with like, it's not as easy as saying good guys and bad guys. Sometimes It really is, but if you are looking at it from a good guy, bad guy sort of perspective, well, then it's very easy for you to get caught up in like the trickery, because it's so that's
a morality they created.
The only way to walk through this, in my opinion, is like the solution to it is to be able to walk through the valley of shadow of death. It's like if you figure out the way to navigate it without being psychologically, physiologically, emotionally caught up in it, the byproduct of that is like you are not part of it, and then you've escaped it. Like it's like this self, like it's self-releasing that way. But nonetheless, where were we talking about? We're talking about the small groups of people who control reality. And right now, they've been doing a lot of stuff kind of behind the scenes, but people have been paying attention. They're like, know exactly what's going on. And as we've been moving closer and closer to this moment, and what they're doing is they are changing life on Earth, the way which people experience life, to be in alignment with more or less the sky clock, the astrological clock, the turning of the ages. That's what's happening. We're literally in the midst of the turning of the ages into full-blown age of Aquarius. Whether or not you think the age of Aquarius is a real thing or a manufactured thing, that's totally irrelevant. That's what's happening. If you go and you look what all of this stuff means, like this is it. These are the archetypes. The people who control your reality, if you look at their buildings are covered with astrological like symbology. The front doors of the Federal Reserve have etched in glass the 12 signs of the zodiac. Everything works like it's and what we're seeing,
by the way, that architecture subject.
It's exactly like as soon as you have the eyes to see, you're like, okay, this is what's going on. This is what's happening. There are infinite expressions of the age of Aquarius. So in my personal opinion, I do a lot of astrology. I probably, that's how I earn my living more than anything else, is like by doing astrological type of services. But I'm the biggest suspect of, like, I see why it's true, and I also see how we can move out of it. But nonetheless, The age of Aquarius has infinite expressions. It has infinite expressions. And what we're seeing right now is a like kind of like a switching of the guards, a sleight of hand. Like right now is when all of it's happening. Like, you know, the people are paying attention, the ones, oh, that's not true. You're manipulating the numbers and this isn't true. And you're doing, that's the sleight of hand. Like eventually, like all of that is either going to be in play or not play. And we are in that time right now. That's what year 0 represents, is like, this is when it began. This is like, you know, when you went from AD to BC, or, you know, whatever calendar system you want to use. And we're seeing that right now. The age of Aquarius is also in a different expression. So we're seeing a very, very dominating Saturnian expression using the archetypes, a Saturnian expression of the age of Aquarius. But there's also a Uranus expression of the age of Aquarius, which is said to be the golden age of humanity. That sounds a whole lot better to me. That sounds a whole lot better to me. And then there's also, like, guess what? There's no such thing as the age of Aquarius to begin with. It's all contrived because we've made up some spots in the heavens, and it all goes back to the Babylonian time. And that's true too. And that is friggin' true too. But to our point of being born into things, we kind of know this culture. So I think we're a little bit tied into the age of Aquarius. But nonetheless, this is what's happening. Right now is where the change is happening. You've got a group of people who are trying to do a certain type of expression, and they're utilizing all of their tricks. And almost all of it is the equivalent of hypnosis. It's hypnosis. Right. That's all it is. It's the Wizard of Oz. It's trickery. It's like, you know, there's probably like, you know, there's an electromagnetic element to it. There's a pharmaceutical element. There's a food element. It's all of that. But like, as soon as you see it, you can move out of it. And so what I see right now, particularly in these early times for people like you and me and everyone who's like watching this and who this is resonating with, Year 0 began, and it met the entire world where they were at that moment. If you were 50, if you were 5, if you were 90, if you were whatever, it's like that's where you were. Whatever your life experience to that moment has prepared you for that moment, and now we're at year 0. And now what's happening is we're starting to split. We're starting to split, and it's going to become more obvious in the next couple months. In the next couple months,
individually, or we as in culture? What do you mean?
Everything. So let me give you an example. So it's going to become very, very clear. You are going to either play their game or not play their game.
Yeah.
All right. So if you choose not to play their game, this is what the penalty is. Well, guess what? You can't play with any of our toys.
Yeah.
And so because we have become so, and this is part of the trickery, because we've grown up with their toys, we think that those toys are important. And so that is the pressure. They're hoping. I mean, when I say they are hoping, this is just, you know, those are words I'm using. Like, so these are the choices. You're either going to be able to have the courage and saying like, oh, I'm not going to do that. And I'm willing to say that there's another way of being. And I'm going to take the path less traveled. And I'm accepting all that comes along with saying no. And that means maybe I won't be able to use your stores. Maybe I won't be able to use your transportation. Maybe I won't be able to go and do this. Guess what? It was always Matrix, never our shit to begin with. It was never ours. And so it's like, you're going to start to see. And so right now in year one, we've got people like me and you. We can still talk. We can share information. But pretty soon, at least this is what is appearing to be happening, is like there's going to be a hard line drawn in the sand. And you know what? Maybe you're not going to be on YouTube. You're not going to be on YouTube if you don't show some sort of credentials. And maybe in year 4, you're not even going to be on the internet. Maybe you won't even be on the internet because your hand doesn't have like the certain radiation. And that's what I mean. There are going to be people who aren't on the internet. This is why I don't want to become so ingrained into it, because the more ingrained you are, the harder it is to walk away. So here's the good news.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here's the good news, because all it is like, you know, oh, wow, I don't want to. The story, and all these are stories. The stories are the hypnosis. This is why the stories are so important, but they've also give us the solution too. So the story is, if you don't play this game, you're going to have to live like the Stone Age. You're going to have to go and live like a friggin' caveman if you can do that at all. And guess what? You don't know how to live like a caveman. You can't grow your own food. You're gonna have to like make rock. You're gonna have to make tools from rocks and all this stuff. And people are like, well, I don't want to do that. So I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't believe for a friggin' moment that that's our only option. Smart city or caveman. Now, I don't exactly know what the future is. But here's the thing. And this is the exciting thing. This is the excitement. This is like the courage of going into the new frontier. So we go back, and I talked about this in the beginning. We talked about like generations, and we're at the point right now where we could describe like the internet to like what I find interesting is like I know I've got young children, teenage boys, and I've got children who are also like under 10, and I asked them questions like, do you understand like the infrastructure of the internet? Do you understand exactly like how this even works? Like, do you have a picture in your mind? And they're like,
good
no.
question.
And I know that because of my time. But so it's just like a dream. They're like, they've got this thing. But the thing
what was the answer to that? I'm sorry, I kind of interjected too much.
I'm sorry. What was your point?
So you asked. I was loving your question about if they had a sense of what it was, and what did they say?
Just shrug their shoulders. Shrug their shoulders. They're like, and I use this language. I use this language a lot. And this is like almost like a private joke for myself, because I don't know if anyone else finds it funny, but I purposefully misused terminology for technology, like the computer box and stuff like that, because I'm kind of one is I'm making fun of my age, but I'm also saying that with pride. Like, listen, like we have been conditioned to believe that inexperience is of value, whereas every other human being has always known that experience is the most important value. So I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but then I also recognizing that the inexperienced generations have no friggin' idea they don't even have a picture in their mind. They're just like, I've got this magic box and somehow it does stuff.
Yeah.
But my point was, and this is where I wanted to go with all this, and we could talk about this. I think this is kind of interesting. Remind me to come back to like, how I know about the internet or how it works. So
I'm making notes.
If you were to go and like 150 years ago or 100 years ago and go back in time, if you had, and I certainly think I have yet to experience this, but I hold wholeheartedly that it is well within the possibility of the human experience and whatever this simulation is, that we can go and travel in time. But nonetheless, we go and you travel back 100 years ago. And you try to explain to a variety of people across the earth the idea of like the internet. You're like, yeah, there's this thing and it's kind of invisible, and you could go and you could store information there, but you could also retrieve any question you have. You can get the information, and you could go and like anything you want, you could get there, and you could send people messages, and you try to explain that, and there's no friggin' point of reference.
Right.
Maybe they might kind of get it, because this is like when you're something like this, you need to have a point of reference to explain these ideas. Otherwise, they're like kind of abstract sort of things, or they're not understood at all. And if you try to explain the internet or how the internet works to 100 different people in 100 different places across the earth 100 years ago, you probably have 100 different visions. But if you try to explain the internet, like even like if you don't understand how it works, like what the internet does, like storing information, accessing information, sending communication, all this sort of stuff to anyone across Earth right now, pretty much everyone's going to have the same picture in their mind. And that is what I believe is our golden thread, is the upside. So as people begin to move away, so a question is, because we went all the way out there, now we're going to come all the way back in. You're like, well, what do you mean like splitting apart? You're going to have people who are going to choose to stay within one reality, and they've made that choice. And you're going to have people who are going to choose not to be in that reality, and they're not necessarily going to want to be Stone Age, living like they were living in the Stone Age. Maybe some people would. Maybe some people, that's exactly what I want. So this is what, and I don't know how, I don't know those details, but I know the storyline. We all have the same understanding of the harmonious version of the internet. The internet is an inversion of a truth. And so let me walk you through this.
Okay.
If it's in existence, it has to be true. It has to be true, because otherwise it wouldn't be in existence. There's no creativity within, like, it's all within like the realm of, like, if it's there, it's there. But we have harmonious and we have disharmonious. Okay. So this is what we know disharmonious is. Disharmonious is based upon domination. It is based upon, like, a destruction or a limitation of another sovereign being in order for you to do your thing. And the very nature of the internet is disharmonious, no matter how you want to look at it. The internet technology was created by the military-industrial complex based upon the idea of killing humanity. The actual material, and so this is where it gets so like tricky. The actual material to build the routers, to build the computers, to build the data centers, to build all of that requires, like, just to make it, slave labor. It requires destruction of the earth. It requires all of these things that are, and I don't mean this in a moral sense or an ethical sense. I mean this like it's just out of harmony. It's out of harmony with the way reality can be. It's certainly like a part of it, like it's an inversion of it. But because we know it's a truth, because it exists, we can deduce that there is a harmonious expression of all of that. And so when like year 5, year 10, year 20, like, it's all based upon people who have an understanding of what, like, this idea of what we're calling the internet, which is, or like, what, like the woo-woo gurus would call the Akashic record, but, like, not like in some, like, only the special folks get to read the Akashic record. No, it's like everyone has access to all of the information, and we can access it, and we can share it, and we can communicate. In everything that you can think that the internet does, we should be able to do in a way that's harmonious, in a way that does not involve the restriction of another sovereign being's free will, in a way that is not destructive of the environment. And so what I see happening is, like, we're at year 0, and each year it's going to get further and further apart. And the folks that decide to go along a certain path, they're going to get further and further disconnected from the folks who are going from a different path. And then eventually they're not even going to see each other anymore. And I don't know, because we're not there yet. Is this, like, how mystical does this get? Do we, like, literally disappear from one of the other, where we can't, because we're on different frequencies and we don't see them? Or like that's part of, like, and I personally think that's an irrelevant point right now. What we need to do is just begin to recognize what's going on and how things work. And recognize where we're putting our energy. So I want to take this one step back. So part of, and what I call the matrix, we've got the simulation, which is just like baseline reality. And then we've got the matrix, which is like the man-made reality in the simulation. That's basically like culture, financial systems, all that stuff. All culture is the matrix. All of them are, because they're all, like, created. Some are, like, maybe more harmonious than other ones, but that's not necessarily a problem. It's just like understanding the fact. The control system matrix is self-referencing. And so when you are in it, when you look within it, it's going to confirm to you that it makes sense. And so, like, right now, like, people, like, I see people, like, who are talking about, like, the future is cryptocurrency, the future is this or that. I'm like, it's all matrix shit. It's all matrix shit. It's like, meet the old boss. It's the new boss. And, like, this is where, like, it's not to be if it's confrontation, if it's I'm arguing, like, this is the way it should be and this is the way, it's the wrong way. Like, where we're going right now is we're picking our teams slowly, and we're moving in another direction. And so going back to kind of like, where we began this whole conversation as it relates to generations. It's like, that's what I see as part of, like, what I'm calling, this is part of the responsibility of the Generation X folks. For those of us who have some degree of an awareness of what's going on, and some degree of like, this is where to go, like to be able to tell, like all I did was just tell a story. I took like all sorts of facts, which everyone else knows, and I just reassembled them in a way which was, okay, now I see there's another version. This is part of being human. It's storytelling. We're storytellers, but the stories create our reality. The stories create our reality. Consciousness and reality are one and the same. And when we become more aware of that, we can. So this is how I see it. This is what I'm seeing right now in my mind. Like, there's a changing of the guard. There's a changing of the guard, whether it's at Buckingham Palace, if you want to go and look at that, or just like the prison in general. And if you're going to make a break, the best time you want to make your break is during the changing of the guard. That is when, because that's when like there's everything's in play. Because once the guard is back in place, you're like, all right, I've got it on lockdown. But right now we are in the changing of the guard. That's the changing of the ages. That's why everything is like this. And so it's like, now's our time. And we don't necessarily need to know exactly where we're going. If it's involved fighting, if it's involved fighting the system, well, that's part of their system. Well, then, that's the wrong way. Right. And we are like literally like, may you live in interesting times. We're in the most interesting time. Every time there's a change of the ages, it's always interesting times, but like, this is it. And it's scary and it's exciting. And so there's the answer to question number 2.
May you live in interesting times. That's what I got for my first fortune cookie ever, and it's always been true. So
and it's always been seen as like, there's like a, it's a blessing and a curse, and I use those terms, but it's meant to be like that when you live in interesting times, it's like this. I'll tell you what, if you're like living in this time, so you and I have like a little bit of experience under our belts, and we could remember what life used to be like to some degree. And the folks who are born into this, and so let me take a step. Let me take a step back. So I used to be much more part of the mainstream world. Like I was always a bit of an oddball, I suppose, but I got as I moved out of that, I still have a lot of relations of people who are in that world. And I've got a good friend. And he's probably like my age, late 40s, and he is very done all the right things. Like he's a good guy. Like I know this guy, his heart is good, and like he wants to do the right thing, and he does the right thing, and he's well rewarded. Like, and what I mean by that is like he's got like, he's like, this is what my future is going to be, and I've got this, I've got like this good stock portfolio, and I've got some real estate, and like, I'm going to retire in like 6 years, and all this sort of stuff. And this was probably last spring. And I was sitting down with him, and our sons played on the same soccer team. And he knows I'm a little bit out there. And he was like really kind of depressed. And this is like, maybe like month 2, month 3 of like, after March, after the Ides of March. And I was telling him, I was like, well, there's a mourning that you have to go through right now, because you've been sold a bill of goods. And you did everything right. You paid your taxes. You saved 10% of your income. Like, you ate your vegan diet. You did all of the things which you're told, you gave money to Hurricane Katrina, to the victims of that. Like, you did all the right things. And I'm like, they just pulled the rug out from underneath you. They just pulled the rug, because all of your plans, like, I don't know what it's going to be in a couple years, but I guarantee it ain't going to be what it used to be. It's not going to be what it used to be. And here's the worst thing. They're not telling you that. So you can't go through mourning consciously. You can't go through mourning consciously and recognize that everything you've done like what you believed in, what you thought you were going to do. you're not given the opportunity to be like, to sit down like as a grown up and it's like, guess what? I lied to you and you're not going to get to do any of that shit. And if you don't go through that, and so this is what the reason why if you don't go through that, they can keep stringing you along.
Yeah.
That's why there's not rioting in the streets. I mean, there's one of the reasons why there's not rioting in the streets. It's because people are being strung along. They're like, I just got to do this for 100 more days. Just 100 more days. Now it's just like it's till the 2022. I just strung it along and like, hey, here's some freebies. Here's some freebies. All right, they give me some freebies. I get to buy stuff from Amazon. I get to buy shit from Amazon. Now, if I told you what I think actually is happening with Amazon, that's the nuttiest thing in the world. But this is what's happening. So where was I going with all this? So looking at this time, like I think that you need to have a real compassion for people, particularly those, and seeing where they are in their life cycle. Like children who are like, I feel for the kids who are in college. The kids who are in college right now, I mean, you live in a college town, so you probably know this. So they started changing college about 15 years ago. All right. Like, I guess it's been really since the 50s, but 15 years ago, like when they started making like co-ed dorms. Right. When they made co-ed dorms, like college became something different. If you looked at college, like prior to that, like college was a different thing. If you looked at college in the 20s, but college eventually became like this amazing experience everyone goes through, and it's like, it's total nihilism. And it totally lined up with like the generation with Pluto and Scorpio and all this sort of stuff. Like it's all lined up, and like everyone comes out with debt, which they're never going to be able to pay off. And they're coming out with like without any real like education, without any skills. They've come out indoctrination. That's literally what happened. And but nonetheless, everyone had a great time in friggin' college. They had a great friggin' time. All the drugs, all the drinking, all the sex, easy classes, like all that sort of stuff. And it was like encouraged, like there's like nothing, like this is the most important thing you could do. You go to college. And so like everyone rewards you. So the kids who are in college right now, they got screwed because the college campuses, now I don't know about necessarily now, but I do know like about particularly last spring and in the beginning of the fall, they were the most draconian places in America. Like it was like you couldn't do anything. And like I remember reading like, updates in all of these schools, like whether it was like in Syracuse or whether down in Texas, like all of these schools of like, you can't do anything. Like all of the, you got to carry something on your phone. And if you're 3 miles off of campus, like something like there's an alert and like your parents find out, like horrible stuff. So you got to take in, those kids, like the old college wasn't necessarily like a good thing for them, but they've been sold a bill of goods and now they're screwed. And they were the ones who were born during 9/11. I'll tell you that. And then we've got like, the people who are in their like 20s or 30s who've got all of this debt, who've like been born into like who are now like in this this economy where there aren't going to be any jobs, or the jobs are changing. And like, it's like all of the universal basic income, all of that's like being promised, but it's like all of their dreams, they've been changed. And then you've got the kids who are like in school, who are in the earlier grades, like, every generation is taking it a little bit differently. And I think part of having some degree of awareness of what's going on, and then compassion to the human experience, is like realizing like where, like regardless if you agree with what those people were doing or not, like they were human beings. Most of them meant well. They were born into this system, and like their system just got flipped upside down. I think that's an important quality of right now as well.
I got to say something. There's so many things. Oh my gosh, Michael. Wow. Right there with you. And that last thing you said is important, because I was thinking about recently, actually kind of a lot, about NLP and the bad rap it sort of gets. And it goes back to the hypnotism and all that stuff that we were talking about earlier. But the positive aspects of NLP include the supposition that everybody is doing the best within the paradigm they've got, basically, and oh great, I've got an alarm going off, which is singing Happy New Year. So Happy New Year. That's interesting because you were just talking about the Happy New Year. Wow, pretty cool. Sidestep.
So you go with NLP. I'm curious where you're going with this.
So yeah, within the paradigm. So there is that, and also the assumption or the supposition, I suppose, that everybody essentially means well, and it's true. I mean, nobody. Well, anyway, I agree with those points, but NLP is that conduit of the framework that we're getting, taught, and also a way to get out of it, maybe, I think. But
well, I definitely, NLP, I think, is one of the most, so part of like this inverse control system is, it's like an inversion of truth. And so when you begin to study it, even if you're seeing the inversion of it, you're still learning truth.
Yeah.
And so NLP, now I'm not an expert on NLP's history, but NLP was, the idea of NLP is much, much older than the fact that we're calling it NLP, but we're calling it NLP. And under the brand name of NLP, there were two guys who invented it, right? Or who are credited.
Grendler and something, Grendler, something like that.
I don't remember their names. Grendler. Erickson, I thought, was one of them. Maybe not. I don't know. It's been a while since but from what I understand, one of those guys was a little bit suspect, or sus, as my children like to say, like a little bit like, this guy, you don't necessarily want him to have access to the keys. But the other guy I thought was like, he was a little bit better.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
So NLP is, if you you are 100% right. By studying NLP, you will understand a model of both your consciousness and consciousness in general. And that is like, and particularly the beginnings of NLP, maybe not necessarily like the application. Someone doesn't have to be like a practitioner in NLP to really benefit from it, as much as it is to realize how NLP works, to understand consciousness. And then once you do that, these are the keys to then both understanding yourself, but then also understanding other people, and then understanding how the system works. I really became turned on to NLP during the first campaign period of what president number was Barack Obama? Whatever his first one was, I remember reading this like 30-page analysis of and I'd always been very like interested and pretty knowledgeable as it relates to like subliminals and like the subconscious and all of that sort of stuff. But I read this 30-page analysis by like a master NLP practitioner and teacher, giving 1,000 examples of how Barack Obama uses basic NLP, but very, very sophisticated NLP in all of his speeches. And at the time I was doing all of this, like reading, if you could go back in time and like look at where the United States was when Barack Obama was first introduced to the American public, like it was the flip side of the coin. It's the same friggin' coin, my friends. It's the flip side of the coin of what the media did to the most recent president. And it's like everyone was like agreed that Barack Obama was the greatest savior, and people could not stop saying enough good things about him. And like, people were fainting at his rallies, and I knew something was up. I mean, I'd been studying how the conspiratorial world works, the underground worked for a while. So as soon as I saw Barack Obama was a no name and he was given the key speech at the closing of the Democratic convention from the previous election cycle, they only do that because they're setting that person up. Like, you knew that was the guy. And so like, I was like, that was it for me with NLP. And that's when I was like, this stuff really, really, really works. And so I encourage like anyone who wants to understand like how consciousness works, or at least get a better working model of it. And particularly something which is tangible, because a lot of consciousness talk is not tangible. It's just purely abstract. Like,
Yeah.
look into NLP, look into that, like the hidden hypnosis.
I'm not familiar with that.
That's just another term for it, hidden hypnosis.
Oh, okay. You mean, are you talking another term for NLP or the other?
Yeah. NLP is hidden hypnosis.
Oh, I see. Okay. I've never heard that term. Fascinating.
Dark hypnosis, hidden hypnosis, all of these sort of things.
Okay. I get it. Well, that kind of fits, I suppose. I have quite a story with NLP that I'll share sometime, but it's very effective, undeniably. And so it behooves one to get to know it.
Certainly so. So where to now?
Holy smacks, man. Let me look at my notes here. And hello to everybody in the chats, by the way. We have some good peeps out there. Among them, hello, Amanda Pomander. Hello, Jarek Thulu and Randy Moggins and Emily Moyer. What's happening, everybody?
Hello to all my friends. I know many of those folks.
Yes, you do. They're all great people. And
Randy, if you're listening, I owe you an email, so I'm going to get in touch with you.
There you go. Can you see the chats or anything, Michael?
No,
that's okay. Can you see the screen when I throw up their comments and things?
I bet you if I clicked right there. Oh, now I see it. Oh, on the comment side. Okay.
I'm still getting familiar with the interface too. But yeah, if not, I can certainly translate for you. But they're right there with you. They've been listening in, and they're just as enraptured, I guess their attention is wrapped as much as mine, something like that. Anyway, oh my gosh, so many things to touch on. So let me go back, I guess, to the Amazon subject, because Emily said that she wanted to hear more about the Amazon Woo. And I just ordered a bunch of stuff off of Amazon, had an experience. So tell me about it.
All right. So first off, like something we didn't even talk about, and and probably it's too big of a topic. It is
it could be a whole other show sometime.
The nature of the nature of what's generally referred to, but this is in Matrix lingo, of river goddess worship or river worship. Okay. All right. So, and I'm just going to go and say, like, and I covered this. This is like a lot of my research known as the Susquehanna mystery goes into that, and magic and all those sort of things. But the first thing I want to say about Amazon as a company is understanding that Amazon as a company name is tapping into the whole idea of river worship. And so, and the idea of river worship is understanding. So, like a river exists on what I would call on the simulation level of reality. It's baseline physical reality, but there's also like the greater reality, which like life on earth exists within. And there's the intersection of rivers, or probably more accurately would be flowing water, naturally flowing water is like a living symbol of the unfolding of life. Like life unfolding. Like so we could go and look at technology. Remember, everything in technology is an inversion of a truth. Like an algorithm is a truth. It's an inversion of like maybe what would call the Tao. Like, there's this underlying sort of thing. So the reason why ancient cultures, like they were so ingratiated towards their rivers and their flowing water is because there was an understanding that was like, that was their connection to the Tao, or the algorithm of life, of the greater reality. And so by becoming aligned with it, is like, this is when you get in matrix living. Matrix living is all about control. Everything is about control. And that's from like everyone who's in it, who's being constantly controlled, to then what you have to do about your day. Like, oh, I got my calendar and my daily planner. I got control, versus like, I don't have to control. This is the whole thing, like, all the spiritual teachings are all about is the fact that you relinquish control, whether you want to call that to God's will or to the Tao or what have you. I mean, obviously, what do you do when you're enlightened? You still got to chop wood and carry water. It's not saying that you relinquish responsibility, you relinquish control. And so what the river is and what flowing water is is like you are aligning to this greater algorithm so that your life unfolds with the greater reality in the simulation. And so like, that's why we do those things. So all that being said, the Susquehanna mystery is like how the Susquehanna River got like totally like utilizing control magic to go and take advantage of all these situations. And that's where we begin with Amazon and Jeff Beelzebub, right? Like that's
God. You just put so many subjects in my head right there. That could be a whole week full of shows. Anyway, go ahead.
So all right. So let's go with this. So
hope y'all are listening to this. This is amazing.
so we've got like, so Amazon begins. The reason why we tap into to Amazon as an NLP word concept is they're tapping into the Amazon River. And if you think about like rivers in terms of like, well, this river is better than that river. It's like that's matrix thinking. That's like the Steelers are better than the Patriots.
Better than? What do they mean better than?
Well, it's like when people. So I've talked a lot about the Susquehanna River, and I often have felt a response from people of like it's a competition.
Really?
Like this river's in competition to that river, and that's not that's the dominance kind of thinking. It's more so of understanding, and I guess maybe it's because I haven't gone so much with you into the Susquehanna. The Susquehanna River is the I refer to it as the grandmother.
You introduced me to Susquehanna on your videos, but I know little about it. So go ahead.
So no one knows about the Susquehanna River, but it's the oldest river on the planet. And it is where it's the birthplace of the computer industry. It is the birthplace of the electrical industry, and it's the birthplace of globalism. And so this all goes back to like John Dee and folks. Did I lose you for a sec?
No, I'm here. I just need to grab my. I need to grab something. I'm right here in the same room. Go ahead.
All right. So the Susquehanna River is we mentioned John Dee a little bit earlier. And yeah. John Dee is another one of these characters. Like I've read a whole bunch of different takes on John Dee, good guy, bad guy. And I, you decide whatever, if you want to go and look at it that way, like that's fine.
It's a good bad thing though.
But the thing, John Dee is associated with something which is called Enochian magic. And Enochian magic is a magic which is about domination and control. So there is like we could use the word magic in a general sense, which is a recognition of the fact that the life which we live is mysterious and we don't quite understand all of the cause and effects. Like sympathetic magic, folk magic, like that is kind of like, a magical with a lowercase m. And then there are other magics which are just straight up control. Enochian magic is that. Enochian magic is a way, and this is the way it's expressed in like John Dee's writings, it's about controlling the tutelatory spirits of Earth.
Yeah.
And so that's another way we could go and look at like what a river is. And so all that being said, the Susquehanna River as one of the oldest rivers, if not the oldest river, is in the hierarchy of matrix reality. It holds a great deal of influence. And by utilizing control, what we'll call domination or control magic on this living symbol, then by controlling it, what you put upon it, because this is in hierarchical, the grandmother of all of these flowing water, because of its age, everything on earth has to be in acceptance with it. That's the nature of like how this works. And so because of this Enochian magic, because that's who's behind all of these sort of things, and you're going to love where we're going to go with this.
I love it
this is why like the first fruits of the computer industry, of globalism, and of electricity are all on this river, so that the river is an altar and then Earth has to go and accept these. That's like the nature, the logic of what was done. And so then like that was put in place 400 years ago, like all of that sort of stuff. Amazon, Jeff Beelzebub is still doing that sort of stuff. But here's the thing where it gets interesting. We're going to go to computers in general. So the very first computer the very first electronic programmable computer. It's the birth of the computer industry it's initially ingrained with the military industrial complex. It's located on the Susquehanna River where it transitions into the Chesapeake Bay. All right. There's a military base there called Aberdeen Proving Grounds. And this is the first computer. And that computer goes by an acronym. ENIAC. It's the electronic numerical blah, blah, blah. But it's pronounced ENIAC, just like Enoch, like Enochian magic. 2 days ago was the 75th anniversary of the public release of ENIAC into the public consciousness. They told people about it right on Lupercalia. So ENIAC sounds like Enochian magic. So then we go and we look at the first quantum computer company, or at least public or known quantum computer company. And this is a company which its name is D-Wave, D-Wave Quantum Computers. So D-Wave is kind of like John D waving to you. ENIAC is like the Enochian magic. We see like over and over again within like the computer technology industry, built into the NLP level of reality, we have all of these clues of like, this is all part of it. This is all part of like the same sort of like dominoes which have been put in place like starting in like the late 1500s, or at least that's the timeline they tell us. Like, who knows?
Wow. That's so synchronistic on so many levels. That's amazing.
So one last thing. So then here's the woo thing. I didn't even get to the woo. So here's the woo with Amazon. So my sense is, so do you remember like Amazon like 10 years ago? Like it would like take a long time to get stuff. And like some of the stuff you could get right away and some stuff you couldn't. And like now, like almost anything is like a day away.
Yeah.
Everything's a day away. And then like beginning like last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago, because part of this timeline is like this time frame, like it's really, really hard to understand the different, the time markers over the last couple of years. But one day there weren't Amazon Prime trucks everywhere, and then next day they were. Like I remember when there weren't those trucks, and then suddenly they were just everywhere overnight. All right,
so true.
So this is my sense. So this
like
is my
5G towers.
So there are the reason why everything is so accessible and is 25 hours or 24 hours away in delivery nowadays is and this is a general CIA kind of like rule of thumb of like whatever we're told of like what is cutting edge technology, what really is the cutting edge technology is 100 years more advanced. Like that's like, and maybe that's just part of the spell as well, but we're going to utilize that. So my guess is like there are probably these regional centers which have these like, we've got like 3D printers, but they're like 3D quantum printers. Wow. They're 3D quantum printers. Like, we know the 3D printer, which we've got like at your house, like, it takes you like 4 hours to make like a little Pokemon figurine or something,
I'm barely familiar with those, but yeah.
Put that 100 years in advance. And like, there's like, some sort of like primordial black goo, which they're using. And like, everything is just like, you buy it and then it's just like made by these Amazon 3D quantum printers. And then they're just shipped out. And like, that's what we're living in. Like, whether or not that's like, actually what's happening, but I certainly think, I'm open to that, but I can't prove that. But we're moving into that reality. We're moving into this blurring of where the material and the immaterial and the virtual reality and all of that sort of stuff. That's what's happening. And undoubtedly Amazon and Beelzebub are the Lord of the Flies are in the, they're playing a very, very key role. very key role with, the other Seattle. What's come out of Seattle? We've got Amazon, we've got Microsoft, and we've got Starbucks. What's going on in Seattle? What is the Space Needle? So.
Oh, right. Getting a little echo there. Holy mackerel. So what do you think that, thereby it's of course leading to that split that you were talking about before, and that, that disconnect between where things come from and us getting them. And so that loss of the ability to manifest in things, that dependence on that, that system, right? And so.
Yes. I would say that system is more about addicting us to novelty, to useless crap. So in the, there's something within the human nature, which, we kind of like, we like newness. We like when spring comes around. It's exciting to us when like the flowers come up. We like when a baby comes out of a woman, we like the surprises. Like that's part of human. But then like, just as everything else has been kind of weaponized, and like, what a MK Ultra, like, it's been like condensed until it's like the sweetest, the most potent version of it. And like, we get addicted to it. And that's part of like, what is going to keep people trapped in the system, because it's probably like, it makes sense. Like it's just a matter of time before you're going to be kicked out. You're not going to be allowed to use Amazon unless, you've got a high enough social credit score, you've gotten like, the right passport or whatever is going to be like the next sort of thing. And people are hooked on it. And like at some point you're going to be like, well, I don't want to be hooked on that. And you'll probably have to go through a detox. Like you'll have to go through a detox of everything. But then the truth of it is you probably don't need any of those things. And just as the old adage goes, and old adages always seem to have a real degree of wisdom, your possessions will eventually possess you.
For sure. So that brings up something that I just got to dive into right now, is how did you come across your, how did you determine your detox?
I think I'm still in the midst of it, we all are. Like I would say there's certain things, there's certain areas in my life, which I am more conscious of wanting to detox. And then there's certain areas which I'm like looking for that balance point, and particularly like, when the split, like I think about that a lot. I think about that a whole lot is like I grew up in this day and age. So it's like, I like stuff. I'll be the first one to admit it. Like, I like, there's certain pieces of clothing. Like I like this shirt because it's got like a waffle on the inside. So I like to wear it. And there's a pocket. Like I'm simple that way. It's part of like just being great. I think there's something true about us in clothes and costumes. I think there's a truth to that. But I recognize that about myself. And I own it. And I'm also like, when the time comes where that's no longer not going to be a thing, well, I'm going to be at least mentally prepared to walk away from it. And that at the same time, like I like to think about, this is a game I play with myself a lot, is like, what are my 33 things? Like if I had to go and, I gotta leave society, what are the 33 things I would take with me? And whether or not that actually happens, I find that as at least a mental detox. And what that does is it enables me to at least become to prioritize what material things I find important, but then also it strengthens the muscle of like, I'll be willing to let go of things which I do kind of like, and I don't want to let go of them. They're just like material things. So like, I would say that's probably a little bit more what I do. Nice. At least on the material level of the detox. And then this is my thought. If I could get to the place where I think that we are capable of being, I don't think we need food. I think
I
food,
think so too.
I think food would be a luxury. And so I play with that. And
Based on my experience with fasting, I have to agree.
I think that's the way. I think, and so can I say one thing about what speaks to me so truly about fasting?
Whatever you want.
All right. So do you remember like when like March of last year came out, and like go back and look at those commercials, and look at the stuff the stuff back then, like it used to like tickle me. And I'll first want to bring up this one point. I can remember very, very clearly. I can remember this so clearly. Like when it first happened, I've stopped watching. I stopped watching like the news a long time ago, but I'll watch the news when there's an event that I want to see how it's being presented. Sure. And so in March, I was watching the news quite frequently, and I remember when what's the title? The chief surgeon, what do they call the surgeon general? The surgeon general came out with Donald Trump and I think like Dr. Faust, and they're like, in the next 2 weeks, we're going to see deaths like we've never seen before. And we're preparing. And they did that. They did that for like 5 days, and then nothing happened. And then nothing friggin' happened. But like, this is again, like the stringing along, this is the, like, there a news story came when you forget, like it's always been alive from the beginning. It's always been alive. But where am I going? Where did I want to go with all this? We were talking about such an interesting thing. I was so excited with the, it was in March of last year, and it was the Surgeon General. I lost it. It'll come back. It always does. But there was a good. It was
story. Huge.
I'm sorry.
It was huge. I loved where you were going with it, and I'm trying to place exactly what it was.
All right, let's look in the comments. What was Dr. Faust going mental? Oh, the detox. What was fasting. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you go back in that time period, the one positive thing.
This is what
they were talking about. The one positive, and they'll probably go back to this again because it's tied very much in the storyline, is how the air pollution in China, when they first instituted their lockdowns, there was almost an instantaneous cleanup of the air. No work needed to be done. You didn't have to go out and get like fancy like atmosphere cleaners. You didn't have to like zap it with like a HARP machine. It just dissipated. And the same thing is said to have happened like in Chernobyl. It's like Chernobyl, no one can live there for 1 million years, and like it'll be a dead zone. And then like Chernobyl has become like the most biodiverse area like in that part of Europe. So the same thing is that seems to be the truth. That seems to be a fundamental truth with like simulation baseline reality, that when the rest occurs, when arrest happens, it just takes care of itself. There ain't nothing you got to do. It's like, again, this goes back to this idea of like, this is why you become ingratiated with flowing water, so that you can surrender to the natural processes which you don't understand because it's a greater mystery reality, but you can appreciate it. And that way you don't have to control everything. So all that being said, this comes back to fasting. And so like there's something that happens in the body when and I'm not an expert with all the terminology, that when you go a certain number of hours without eating, like when the body does not have to be in that digestive process, it cleans out toxins in the brain, like all of these. I can't think of the word, but like we see all of these things, like parts of the body, the human body begins to clean out, which would never get to if you're constantly in this like alchemical digestive process. And so we see this happening in the air. We see this happening on the land, even with the most toxic shit out there. The most toxic shit out there, that like you give me Chernobyl, you give me all of the stuff they're burning in China. But guess what? When you go a period of time without doing nothing and you let it rest, it cleans it out. And so to me, I think
the cell death you were talking about, is that what you're referring to? The cell death that are like encouraging that cell death and regeneration process through fasting?
There's another word which maybe it's that, but there's a word which I can't think of, which talks about how like like when you are not in digestion, it's just the body does the same thing as the atmosphere is the air. Like when it's at rest, it cleans itself. And because we are so addicted, our bodies and our mindset are so addicted that we constantly need food. Like, so where I want to go with all this, I think like, I don't think I could stop eating food tomorrow and like I'd probably get really skinny because I'm already skinny right now. But like, I think that part of the moving away process is like, as we become more and more adept at fasting, and when it goes from like 16 hours to 17 hours to 19 hours, and it is a purifying, but it's like, a lot of people, we fast and we think about it like, and maybe you do think about it like, as it relates to the greater level, but as we become, or the greater reality, but this is part of like this matrix level lie, is that you need the food. Like, and this is where they're going to get you. And it's like, well, you got to do this because I got to eat. And and I'm not giving anyone any dietary advice. Like, don't take my word for it, because I'm telling you, like, there's a 4D printer where all your Amazon stuff comes from. But this to me seems to be like the sort of direction which we need to go in. And it begins with a story. It begins with an idea. It begins with the like, okay, there's a something. I can wrap my conscious mind around it. And this is how we move out of the matrix.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, Emily nailed the word. That was the word.
Yeah, that's a cell death thing. Yeah, that's totally true. What's your experience with fasting? Do you do it much, or?
I mean, I don't eat until 1. I try to have a small window of food, and so I don't eat till after 12 o'clock, and I'll probably eat until 7 o'clock.
Me too, basically, on a given day. Intermittent fasting. Then.
So I try. The things which I think are bad are sugar. And I try to avoid that, but I also am like, guess what? If I can go 17 hours and I know that the atmosphere over Wuhan will clean out in 24 hours, I'm like, I trust my system to clean it out,
Yes, that faith or whatever.
I believe in that, because so much is like fear-based. Like the thing, so I'll talk a moment, I'll get on my soapbox, if you will, about food. I think that there are so many contradictory diets.
Yeah. There's
so many contradictory diets. And when you listen to someone who's an expert in any one of those diets, like, and you listen to them, you're like, wow, that makes a lot of friggin' sense.
Sure.
And then you're like, but it's contradictory. And so it just like I've come to the conclusion, as long as you believe you need food, like it shouldn't be complicated. Like when you get into like people are really knowledgeable and they start talking about, I'm like, it shouldn't be complicated. It shouldn't be that way. Like I think like in the idea of how I think a human being could live in this simulation, and maybe like there's different words I need to use other than the human being. Maybe you eat like 4 times a year. Maybe, or 8 times a year, and they're celebrations, and they're fun, they're feasts, and they're like people come together, and you eat whatever the F you want. And like if you pay attention to the natural world, like it kind of tells you what to eat, and like you don't do it a lot, and and that would be like how we would eat. Now I don't think we're necessarily there right now, but we're not even at year 1. Maybe that's year 5 stuff we discover.
It's interesting that I'm thinking along those lines as well. That's fascinating. So if being at year 1, maybe. I mean, that's a wild concept for a lot of people even consider. So it's going to take some time. How many years in do you think it'll be?
I don't know. Like, look at like, so what we can do is we can look at the models they gave us. So this is in my opinion, the trickiness like we can look at a model and then we can gauge like, okay, that's an expectation. But then as soon as you do that, well, then you're ingratiated with the matrix thinking. So that being said, so that's just my caveat. Look at the switch from AD to BC.
I think about that so much.
There's a 33-year, isn't there a 33-year window?
I did not know that. Do you mean the period between?
Yeah, like, isn't it like, you know, it's
Jesus' life, of course.
Yeah, Jesus' life.
Makes sense.
So is it 33 years? I don't know. But then 33, you know, are those the vertebrae? Are these, you know, the 33 levels of Freemasonry, you know, whatever. Exactly. It's all of those things. So, or does 33 represent something else? Like, I love the idea of like when numbers, like kind of like what you're doing with your arms, like it's the shape of the numbers are really pointing out what the number really is. It's not like the, you know, I've got 3 things in my hand right here, though that's the truth. So it's I'm sorry?
You mean the symbol of the number is the important thing?
Yeah, or we're going to have freedom with it. So if we want to go and take, like, there's going to be a 33-year window from, like, you know, from year 0 till at least when the next thing begins, like redefine what you want 33 years to maybe even look like. When you scratch hard enough at any of these matrix level stories of reality, you realize that, like, you could poke holes in them, that there's something not real. Yeah. Just from the very fact that, like, you know, like, you're made of atoms, and atoms are 99% empty space. So you're 99% empty space. You're like, okay. And, like, you know, this using that, flipping it on its head is like, well, reinvent everything. You have that. We apparently have that capability, but then also recognizing, you know, I'm not encouraging anyone to jump off of a building because they think they can fly, but recognizing that maybe this is a skill set. Maybe skill set is how you get out of the, you know, the matrix consciousness and reality. Yeah.
Good point. Yeah, that reminds me of a cartoon that Jerry Cthulhu shared with me before about exiting the matrix. I'll share it sometime. But man, those are such good points. So the recognition of that inversion is so huge. And when you start to see it, it just all starts falling apart, like you were saying. Like, it makes sense how people can get trapped in that net of everything. But you start to see that, like, if you just kind of challenge things by inverting it and trying something the opposite that, you know, you've been ingrained to think or whatever, there are interesting results.
Yeah. And it's again, like, may you live in interesting times. So, well, I think what we're talking about, what we're talking about has always been, like, you know, anyone from any culture during any time has had if they had the interest, they could have gone down a path of, like, trying to break out of whatever matrix they were living in.
Right.
We are living during the changing of the guard right now. And what is nice about that is suddenly so many of us are forced, you know, I've been talking like this for like a long time, and for a long time people are like, you're freaking nuts. And like now they're like, oh, my entire world is my whole world is crumbling down, and I need a new storyline. And at least people are open to new ideas. And so because of that, like, there's so many more of us that can begin to have these conversations and to experiment and realize, like, you know, I've got my hot buttons where I'm interested in researching. You got your hot buttons, and like where it goes from just being abstract to like, no, this is actual working reality. Me and Emily have got this ongoing joke of like, we know that we've cracked it when like I knock on your door across the country and you're like, how'd you get here? And it's like, well, I was able to walk through the portal in my backyard. Like, nice. You know, I still want to, like, I don't want it to be an abstract. I want this to be this is going to be a real deal.
Yes. Right. Yeah, absolutely. So that absence of abstract is an interesting concept in itself there. So we're going back to the fasting thing though. So, and diets and all that stuff. Are you, do you just basically listen to your body right now, or how are you eating? As far as what you eat.
So my partner, Jenny, she's in charge of food. That's and nice. So I tend to eat what's on my plate. I'm easy. So,
Cool.
so this is one of the things which is very, very interesting. So Jenny used to, she used to follow a really strict vegan diet.
Mm-hmm.
And then she went very, very strict carnivore diet.
Mm-hmm.
And what's been fascinating to me, I've always just eaten whatever I want to eat for the most part. The only thing which I'm really interested in is sugar.
Yeah.
And then what things make conscious sense to me, but like I eat like I'm gonna eat what's I'm lazy. I'm gonna eat what's on my table. When she was eating like mostly vegan, I was like, all right, I'll eat vegan. Well, actually, we never ate vegan, but it was like much more of a plant based. And like when it's carnivore, I'm like, yeah, that and it makes sense. Like my body type doesn't really change much, I suppose, depending upon what I eat.
Mm.
I always need to take a nap in the afternoon, so my energy level is always the same. Like I don't have those sort of things. But the point I want to make with my experience with Jenny and then watching what Jenny's gone through is like, she was 100% committed with like each of these different sort of strategies for food, and very, very knowledgeable in them. And what I took away from that was like, and I know people who are vegan, I know people are carnivore, I know people are all these sort of things, and they're very, very smart, and like all of their perspectives, like it supports for the most part, it supports like the positive experiences they've gotten out of food. And I'm like, a lot of it's contradictory. So it's like, I think mostly is like, I trust in my body's ability, particularly giving it enough rest to do what it needs to do. I personally, ethically, morally, like the vegan, like moral argument makes a lot of sense to me.
Sure.
Because the animal sort of thing, but then also the carnivore logic of like, guess what? Plants don't want to be eaten either. And like, if you do enough like Clive Blackster, like research and like The Secret Life of Plants, you're like, yeah, and plants put out a whole lot more poison than animals do, and they don't want you to eat. So guess what? They don't want to be eaten either. So this is why you're not supposed to
get strong when we have meat. So there you go.
Exactly. So it's like there's a logic. You can look at all of these different systems. Like there's a logic, like the macrobiotic like logic. I love that. Like I love the yin and the yang and all of these things. Like, Ayurvedic. Like I love like all of those sort of like I can if there's a logic system. Like I dig understanding like the reason why things are done. But what I've experienced, every logic system, if you scratch hard enough, will have a hole in it because they're all matrix based, regardless of the matrix. And so that's why I think, if you're in line truly on the greater reality level, you could probably, you can go without eating. And here's the thing where it gets really interesting to me is our matrix, the current matrix we are in, is 100% based upon dominance. It is a slave master relationship in every way. Dominate over the landscape, dominate each other, dominate whatever. And that seems to make sense. If you have to eat to live, like, well, I got to eat, and it's like I'm dominating something, whether that be a plant or meat. But if you don't, you're out of that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And, at least for now, like I'm holding on to the idea that fasting, like learning to fast is like learning to fly, learning to meditate, or learning to levitate, all of the things that we and understandably don't think are possible.
For sure. I've had a lot of experience with that over the past 10 years or so, and gone through a journey of all sorts. And I remember I haven't gone to any high school reunion except my 30th, and it's because I was so ripped, and I was like, I gotta just go. And so I did, and I was talking to people, and they were just like, "What?" I mean, I remember making a comment that we don't have to eat nearly as much as we think we do, and that was something I was totally going through and experiencing. That like I just didn't. Once you escape from that, like thinking about your next meal, that really takes up a lot of most people's consciousness. Mine, for a long time, did. And then when you let go of that, it's like you just really don't. you keep having energy. It just keeps coming, and you just,
Yeah,
it's a mystical spiritual journey in itself.
it really is. And so that's so interesting too, how you described, and you're right. Like you keep thinking about the next meal. You know who talks that way? Addicts.
Addicts.
An
Yeah.
addict talks about, I keep thinking about the next hit, whatever that hit may be, whether that's booze, whether that's like, crystal meth. It's like as soon as that hit is done. And so there seems to be a similarity with that. I've found
NLP has helped me with those, with addictions too, by the way, and losing weight. So there you go.
MLP helps with everything. I mean, yeah. It's those are
inadvertently.
I think that as we begin, or at least the potentiality is like for those who are going to walk away from the matrix system, like every single assumption which we've held about life on earth and being human should at least come into question, if not fully be like, deconstructed.
It's all on the table, man. It's all on the table, right? I mean, it should be.
Yeah.
Like, just kind of look at those things, like examine all those thoughts. There's a talk about NLP again. That's funny. I don't know why we keep coming back to this, but there was a little video clip I'll need to share sometime. But the guy had some brilliant things to say about how most of the thoughts that we have are not our own, and that we have bought every idea from somewhere. Someone has told us these things, and so like it's important to just kind of examine when you have a thought, no matter what it is, like where's that coming from, and does it, where did I get that information from, and is it something that I want to continue with, no matter what it is? It could be even the smallest thing, like wanting a sugary treat.
Yeah,
everything.
It's and the magic of that, I guess, is it's not necessarily like, well, what do you do when you ask that question? It's not like, well, okay, now I asked the question. What am I supposed to do after that? Do I not listen to it? No, it's the fact that you can step away from, you become conscious that you are having a thought. And that's it. That's where the magic happens. And that's not like a spiritual type of like, oh, I'm conscious of, I'm having a thought, and am I a butterfly or dreaming of a butterfly? It's not that. It's practical. You get out of the loop. That's why it's important. And so a lot of people think about this like, I don't want to be a yogi. I don't want to be a monk. I don't want to be a spiritual person. But it's like, this isn't spiritual stuff in the way those spirituality has been sold to you. It's understanding how the non-physical works and is all connected.
Yeah, man. Wow. What did you just say that I needed to say something about? Can you go back about 20 seconds? Do you remember? My brain is just kind of going forward. Dang. Wow. Okay. Does anybody? I'm so in the moment. I totally lost.
We're talking about being spiritual, about catching your thoughts.
About being spiritual. It's about being spiritual and
like the magic happens, or about go on.
Yeah. So a quote by Mark Twain I just heard recently, I think it was Mark Twain, is the definition of freedom is that moment between you are told what to do, even if it's by yourself, and choosing what to do next. That moment between is the freedom. And it's also the magic, as you were saying. Yeah.
I mean, wow. That's I like that. The moment I got a book where I like to write down quotes, and so that one I'll hopefully I'll remember to write down. I love quotes, like
I do too.
It's
my memory, of course, I could be off on the if there even is a real exact quote, who knows? But it's good. It's a good thing.
It's certainly so. Mark Twain, though, here's a little piece of trivia for the trivia fans. So I just found this out recently. So I like to joke that all roads lead to the Susquehanna. So Mark Twain is best known for his writings on the Mississippi, right? Sure. But he actually wrote all of his. He wrote, I want to say, probably both Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn while overlooking the Susquehanna in Elmira, New York. Yep.
Wow. Cool.
So
I love how it keeps going back to that. I'd never heard of the Susquehanna, as far as I know, before hearing your talks.
Have you ever heard of the Chesapeake Bay?
Back. I'm sorry.
Have you heard of the Chesapeake Bay?
Yes.
Well, that's the Susquehanna River.
I just learned that today as you were talking. I didn't
So
realize
it's like
that.
few people know that, even people who like live in the mid-Atlantic where the Chesapeake Bay is. So if you literally look at the geology, the physical description, the Susquehanna River transitions. It comes down like from New York, and it transitions from just being a river to what's known as an estuary, which is a, partially freshwater, partially saltwater, and that's the Chesapeake Bay. It's got two different names, so people just assume they're two different things. But it's like, calling, because your legs are not called your torso, it doesn't mean it's not all part of the same body. How about like, have you ever heard of baseball?
Yeah, I used to play baseball, and yes.
And you know that there's like a place, there's a place like the greatest baseball players in the whole wide world. Like, there's a place where they're honored, right?
Oh, the Hall of Fame. And I was hearing from you, go on, please, that it's near the Susquehanna somewhere.
Well, if you know where the Hall of Fame is in Cooperstown, New York, like literally 500 feet from the Hall of Fame building is where the Susquehanna River begins. Wow. This was an ancient and significant meeting place of chiefs of the Iroquois Confederacy. It's like these locations have been usurped for when I say matrix level. What I mean by matrix is like a control, like a man created culture, and so they
usurped. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I like usurp. That's an interesting choice of words, but keep going. Yeah.
I hope I used it correctly.
I've
been known to both misuse words and mispronounce them, but I think I got that one right. But we see that
with the idea that maybe they didn't create it, they just found it somehow, whatever that means, and they're repurposing it somehow.
Yes, undoubtedly. And so like, and I go into, I did a video about this, which you may find interesting, particularly if you have a fondness of baseball.
Not so much, but I'm
when
curious.
You go and you look at the story of why Cooperstown, became the location for the Baseball Hall of Fame. Like, it's just, you're able to poke your finger through it very easily. And it all goes back to theosophy, if you're familiar with the theosophical movement and some of those players. And it's a fascinating, it's a fascinating journey. They knew where they wanted to go. They always wanted to put it right there. And the Baseball Hall of Fame, in my opinion, is a symbol of something much more significant than just like, the best players of that game.
What do you mean?
Well, so if you go back and you realize that, and I've covered this in many times in other conversations. So maybe if you're interested, we could go into the details. But nonetheless, so it's like baseball is connected to the Theosophical Society and the Theosophical movement.
By the way, first word I thought of when I woke up this morning was Blavatsky. I don't know why, but go ahead.
Well, so I'll tell you this. So when it sounds like you're somewhat familiar with Blavatsky, so she was the first president of the the U.S. Theosophical Society, right? Okay. This is like late 1800s, and then she was she was a very controversial character. And at some point, she left the United States and she returned to India. And when she returned to India, Abner Doubleday, who is a very well-known and popular Civil War general, was then named
general.
I'm sorry?
I didn't know he was a Civil War general.
Abner Doubleday. Abner Doubleday was a Civil War general. When you begin to realize there's a technique, when they start like saying like a certain person is credited with all sorts of things, that there's something else. Francis Bacon's one of these guys. Ben Franklin's one of these guys. But Abner Doubleday is said to have been the person of the Union Army who really won, or at least saved the day for the Union for Gettysburg. Gettysburg is when the Civil War like changed directions or tides from like the South winning to the North winning. Doubleday was able to, in the very beginning of that campaign, was able to hold back very outnumbered the Southern forces had completely outnumbered the Union forces. The leader was killed. Doubleday stepped in and for like a day or two was able to hold back the Southerners until like the backup arrived. So Doubleday is like the hero of the day. He's said to have fired the first the first shot of the Civil War at Fort Sumter in or at least from on to Fort Sumter from a ship out. I guess I don't know if it's right in the Atlantic or maybe there's a bay there, but he said for that. And he's also said to have invented baseball, and he's said to invent baseball at Cooperstown. But like, you know, those stories may have some, well, but definitely not the baseball, but like some of the other stories, maybe they have some degree of truth. But what we also know is that he was the president of the American Theosophical Society. And the person who said that Doubleday invented baseball was Albert Spalding of Spalding Sporting Goods, the owner of the Chicago Cubs. And he was a huge theosophical financial supporter. And he's like, oh, yes, this former president of the U.S. Theosophical Society invented the game right here. So, and he invented it in Cooperstown. And a handful of years later, the heir to the Singer sewing machine fortune then built the Baseball Hall of Fame where it's located right now in Cooperstown, right next to the source of the river. So in my opinion, if I were to interpret this, is like what baseball, amongst a lot of sports, but baseball in general is it's definitely Freemasonic, but it is a living ritual of the dance of life. You know, that's what it is. I'm not the guy who says that, but like that's like, you know, people who've like written about the mystic implications of baseball, and it's like, you know, that's why you go back to the 50s, like, you know, a lot of baseball terminology was like had like sexual innuendos, like, you know, a home run would be like sex and stuff like that. Well, it's because baseball in itself was like, you know, the batter's holding like a big phallic in his hand, and like, you know, they're throwing an egg and like you hit it out of the park, and it's like the regeneration of life.
Wow.
So baseball is like a living symbol, and that's just like the just like starting it. So baseball is a living symbol of like, you know, life on Earth and like the whole sort of like experience of being human. And we can put that in the context of Freemasonry. But nonetheless, so if we then understand that baseball is a symbol of life, when we look at the Hall of Fame, who are said to be the best players the game has ever produced. Symbolically, these are the best players who've ever lived life, if you will. And we're looking at this from a theosophical perspective. So it's like, you know, this is the Hall of the Ascended Masters.
Wow. Wow.
At the most sacred location on Earth. On the Grandmother River, on the source, like where the Herkimer diamonds are found, where all of this stuff happens. And that's, you know, that's what we see there.
Wow. I've heard you touch on those things, but that's a different level for me. Holy mackerel. And it also makes me think of, was it Hank Aaron that just passed from the vaccine thing? That's kind of curious.
Yeah. So 2 weeks after getting the shot, I suppose.
With respect to synchronicity, I've got to ask you, is there any void of any kind connection to the whole Spalding thing that you were just talking about?
Void?
Yeah. I'll tell you why in a minute. It's a Family Guy reference.
Okay.
And
to walk me through. I don't watch. I've never seen the Family Guy. I know what it is, like as a cultural touch point. But walk me through.
Yeah, I can sum it up real easy. I used to really be into it. I used to be immersed in culture. Not anymore at all. But anyway, there was a skit they did that was kind of referring to Castaway with Tom Hanks, which I never saw. But the scene on the raft where he's talking to the volleyball, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Wilson.
Yeah. And I think, but so from my recollection, could be Mandela effect, but I recall Peter saying, because it's Peter who's Tom Hanks, and he goes, he says something about something, and he calls him Voight. And the volleyball's pissed off, and he goes, or no, he calls him Wilson. And I just ruined it, but the volleyball looks at him all angry, and he goes, "The name's Voight, dumbass." And so it was just that thing. Like he called him Wilson, like the movie, and the volleyball says the name's Voight. Like, you know, Voight is another manufacturer of volleyballs and sports.
Right. So as it relates to Spalding.
Yeah, because Spalding is another
right, because Spalding was like, yeah, they manufactured. I mean, if you want to get into baseball, say that again, please.
I think Voight Spalding might have been a joint company at one time. I don't know.
They may have been. It would make sense considering there were only so many manufacturers of sporting equipment. Spalding, one of the things like how he made his money is he had a Chicago-based sporting goods store, and then he was able to get the contract to manufacture all of the baseballs for the major leagues.
Oh, lucky contract.
So Spalding started, and so this was like, so that's when you get deals like that, it's a license to print money. And I believe it was during that when Spalding started to manufacture them, that's when baseball got its 108 stitches.
Oh.
So like 108, like that's a really significant number. In many, many different practices. And we see that shows itself in baseball and with the Chicago Cubs in specific. Like, it shows itself time and time again.
There's that Happy New Year alarm again. Sorry.
Happy New Year?
It's it's a little clock that I got at a thrift store, and I don't know why it's going off now. It's not, I didn't know it was set for now. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's no problem. It's actually probably, I just looked at the clock. It's just about 1 o'clock. So I know that it's time for me to start wrapping up right here. So that's really a good indication.
Oh, okay. There it is. That's probably good because I'm so wrapped in what we're talking about, man. I could keep going and going and going. Just even on the last couple of minutes of what we were talking about, there's so much to go into. So, do you want to? How soon do you need to wrap it up? Do we need to sort of kind of close things out now? Do you want to?
Yeah, let's start. We'll start closing up. If there are any final questions or thoughts which you want to share with me, and then I could guess I'll say my final goodbyes and where anyone could find any of my stuff if they're interested in that, and we can go from there. And plan on talking again. This was very enjoyable for me.
Awesome, Michael. I'm glad to hear that because I'm going to be thinking all day about this conversation and just. And we hyper-focused on rabbit holes, which is what I do best. But if anybody in the chats has a question for Michael, please let us know, and we'll see if we can address that maybe, if Michael's down with that. I don't expect probably a slew of questions, but if you have something quick to bring up, I'd love to do that. Let's see. As far as myself, too many rabbit holes, too many things. I've made a huge list.
Yeah, we hit a lot of topics, but that's kind of fun. That's how I like to do it, at least. I think that's fun.
Oh, totally. Me too. That's totally my style. That's why one of the reasons I asked you on, because I love the way you and Emily have been able to do that. And I was like, I think I would enjoy conversations with both those people. And I was correct in that.
Excellent.
But I guess, do you have any, before I wrap it up or anything, I just want to ask you about if you have any thoughts on the World Fairs or Mount Rushmore. Probably lots.
Probably lots. Yeah, obviously, so many of us, I find Howdy Mikowski's work on the World Fairs unbelievably thought-provoking. And I think there's a lot there. And just like we were talking about with the Baseball Hall of Fame, I think we can look at the World Fairs as an usurping of something. I think there's probably multiple levels. As it relates to Mount Rushmore, I guess I haven't really thought much of it, but when you pointed out, if everything else is has some sort of greater significance, something to the degree of Mount Rushmore, of the carving of faces is Mount Rushmore actually are they called the Black Hills of South Dakota? Is that what?
I believe so. I've
never been there, but I'm pretty certain that's rather significant and sacred land that of course there's going to be an implication of that. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that next time.
Okay, that sounds cool. Yes, I'd love to go into that. hopefully Howdy will be on the show soon. He's going to get in touch with him after he's done with his move and stuff. So hopefully he'll be here soon. I loved the show with you. That was awesome. And he has so many cool things to say.
No, definitely. And I think it's kind of nice. Like, I recognize I bring one degree of energy and approach to this time. And Howdy brings a very different approach and a very different energy. And I think at this time, like we're all in a place where we need to recognize, you know, what each person brings, and we all like bring in a different sort of flavor. And it is the accumulation of all of these different ways, which is how we move out and forward.
Yes. I don't want to be part of the one with everyone. I want to be, the diversity, the true diversity.
So let me say, can I say some closing words and then, okay. So, my favorite thing to do is I love to work with people and people's stories. So, if you go to Susquehanna Alchemy, that's my website, and I offer quite a few services for people. But the most common one, or the most popular one, is called a biomancy session. And what I do is I'll have you fill out an intake form, tell me all about your life and life experiences, and then you give me your astrology, and I look at that, and then we talk a little bit about what's going on at the exact moment we spark to talk, and then I begin to tell you your story in a different way. And it's not so much like I know your story as much as it is I'm going to give you another way of looking at what you've always taken for granted, so that you can find that in-between space. Remember that Mark Twain quote you told me? Between like when you hear something and when you act. And so I create that space, or I attempt to. That's the purpose of that. And then I think it's particularly important at this time, because as we're moving forward, we need to recognize all of these things that we didn't even realize we're carrying, that we're holding on. So like, to move into new space, we have to realize what we're still holding on to. So there's that. You could do that at Susquehanna Alchemy. Obviously you mentioned Emily Moyer. Me and Emily, we do a show once a week, and you could go to her website. A lot of the stuff is private, or her YouTube channel, Emily Moyer's, our Project Kids and Playing the Glass Speed Game. And then lastly,
I touch on that. Oh shit. Go ahead.
Lastly, I put out some of my own material on private material on Subscribestar. I put that out every week. If you want to support me, that's always a great place to do that. And then you could go to YouTube for all of the public Susquehanna Alchemy stuff. Lots of presentations, lots of good stuff there. So if anyone's interested, they can go there to find more about me.
Nice. And I'll put down in the show notes the bio and those links, just to make sure that's all tidied up.
Excellent. I'd appreciate it if you did that.
It's definitely worth it. There's so much material there already. There's no way to catch up on it all. And you're putting out fresh stuff all the time. Damn. It's a river. You just got to jump in and go, right? There
we go. The symbology works. All right, my friend, this was a lot of fun. I look forward to our next time.
Blessings. Take care, everybody. Thank you for being here, Michael. Be well.
Thank you for having me. See you, everybody.